Welcome everyone. We are now moving in our Economics of Gender class to learn a new way of looking at the economics of the household, which is going to draw on game theory. Now, the bits that we have learnt so far are based on the neoclassical model of economics, and we have to start thinking of the neoclassical model, particularly associated with Gary Becker, as a subset of the theories we're going to learn now in game theory. So we're not going to say that the neoclassical model is never right, but we're going to say that the number of times the specific neoclassical model we learned has adequate explanation for what we are seeing in the world is kind of small. And maybe we need a theory that is capable of giving us a more general explanation for what is going on, which brings us to game theory. So before we enter how game theory is used in the economics of gender, we're going to learn a little bit about the history of game theory and how to set up games. So a little bit about the history. Game theory was inaugurated by mathematician, polymath, this is a really brilliant guy, John von Neumann. Now what von Neumann did is he developed this theory of games, and it's called game theory because he's trying to use the kind of formalization that takes place when somebody learns a game. So if you want to play chess, you have to learn the rules of chess. You have to learn what moves are allowed. You have to learn what your objects are. You want to learn how points are earned. And most importantly, you want to learn how to win. And so what game theory did was to use some of those insights to say, can we use this way of figuring out the strategies that people use in games, predicting them, as a way to model real life events, where in similar fashion we like to think that, for example, countries use game theory because they are approaching international relations like a chessboard. There's a very famous image of Prince Philip of Spain and Queen Elizabeth of England with Europe as a chessboard, and they are fighting chess to decide who wins. You might have heard of the game called War or Country Risk. So these are ways in which you're trying to say that, look, you can use rule-bound modeling to predict what will happen in the real world. Following his initial paper on game theory, von Neumann partnered with his colleague, the economist Oscar Morgenstern. And so then they wrote a book which applied game theory to economics. And in fact, that was the first sort of consistent book to take game theory and give it a systematic application to one discipline. And it worked well for economics because, as we have seen, economics already has certain kinds of assumptions about rationality, about competition, about maximizing your utility, about wanting to get the maximum you can, highest points, win that game, right? So there's very many ways in which at least conventional neoclassical depictions of economics fit well with game theory, which really does reflect a certain kind of gamer culture. But I'll stop here. On the history, I'll add just two more things. That John Nash, his movie A Beautiful Mind, which is about his life, is a very interesting figure, someone who struggled with mental illness, but who also ended up winning the Nobel Prize for some really amazing contributions to the field of game theory. And a really wonderful book by the historian of economic thought and the economic theorist Philip Mirowski. Mirowski, Mirowski. It's called Machine Dreams. And what it does is it tracks how metaphors of war and metaphors of technology and ideas of rational, hyper-smart machines are behind many of the models that we use in game theory. In economics, this is not that unsimilar to the way in which we looked at the GDP, and Marilyn Waring showed us that the GDP makes certain things hypervisible. So one of the points Mirowski is making is game theory can often make certain things like competition, survival of the fittest, zero-sum games, not helping each other, hypervisible, and make other things such as cooperation, altruism, invisible. And if that's the case, it's going to be interesting to realize why game theory is so important for us. Because a lot of feminist economics is about including these other elements into game theory. Now that I have a bit of a history, so I'm going to stay alert about how I'm going to use game theory as I have in the past with other numbers and models. I wanted to talk about what do I need in order to set up a game. The simplest depiction of the minimum I need to set up a game is that I need to make assumptions about how the game works. This is sometimes called the rules of the game. If I want to play chess, I need to know a little bit about how to set up the board, what moves are allowed, how many players in a game, things like that. So what we are going to look at is sometimes called PAPI. P-A-P-I, PAPI. What do I need to know? Players. When I build a game theory model, I need to know how many players are in the game. Is it a two-player game? That's chess. Is it a multiplayer game? You can think of some of those big online gaming portals where there are tons of people, right? You can have teams. You can have all against all. So you have players. Then you have actions. What are these players doing? If it's chess, the actions are that you move a piece. And there are rules about whether the moves are sequential. I move first, then you move. I move first, then you move. Or whether the moves are, we both have to lock in our moves and release it, and then we'll see who wins. So a game like rock, paper, scissors. Anybody played rock, paper, scissors? That is a non-sequential game. I don't get to see if you've got a rock before I decide whether to put scissors or paper. We both have to decide, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, rock, paper, scissors, same time. But if it's chess, it's sequential. You do your move, I will then look at it, and then I will do my move, and so on. So there are certain actions. These actions give me payoffs, rewards, points. So in rock, paper, scissors, we can say the payoff is best of 3. In chess, you can have payoffs that are both about how fast you do things in a grandmaster tournament, about the number of games you win, but in an individual game, the payoff would be, can you capture the opposing side's king? In card games, the payoffs are often points, and at the end of the game, you tally who's got the maximum points, and so on, right? So you got players, you got actions. The action can be discard a card, whatever. You got a payoff, you get the points you get when you collect a set. And then finally, you need information. And this is a set of rules inbuilt into the game, which is related to the strategies you will use to come up with actions. So a game like bluff or a game like poker, I don't know what the other person's hand is like. And a lot of the game is about trying to figure out from their bids or the cards that have already been discarded, information that I can use to make some educated guesses about what cards you think this person has. Are they telling a lie? Are they telling the truth? What are they doing? In some games like chess, the information is visible to the whole world to see. My opponent and I see exactly the same board. We both have, at any given point in the game, the same information. And we both are operating out of a field where everything is visible to everyone. So the assumptions in neoclassical economics, for example, is that there are many players, they're all very small, Their action is each one engages in purchases and sales in markets. Their payoffs is their utility or their profit maximizing or whatever. And you have perfect information. Everybody has the same information. Anybody can come in and come out. There is no insider trading. There is none of that. All right? So you can see that the neoclassical model could be set up as a game of a very particular variety. But the kinds of games we have far exceed the neoclassical model. So let's do a very brief run through of some of the kinds of games that we can look at, and then we'll go ahead and move to looking at those games that are useful for feminist economics.